in my personal opinion, if you've watched any of my content or if you followed any of my content or anything like that, you maybe know that, in my opinion, time is one of the most valuable assets we have. Not even one of. I think it's the most valuable asset that we have in life. And the reason why I think that is because you can't get time back. Like everything else in life, more or less, you can get back. Time is one of those things that no matter what you do, as far as I'm aware of, if someone knows or if someone has a magic pill that can reverse time, or one of you guys have a time machine, I would love to see it. I'm sure if you could invent that, that'd be $1 billion industry, $1 trillion, not even billion, $1 trillion industry. But to my knowledge, so far at least, I've yet to find a way to reverse time. I found a way to condense things and get things done quicker, but never to reverse time. So time is super valuable, easily one of the greatest assets we all have on this planet. And that's one of the main things I try to focus on. Like whenever I do a training or if I try to coach or do anything like that, I try to make sure that people understand the importance of time. But yeah, I would see so many people just stuck in a loop. It's fascinating to me. Like you'd see somebody and they're say 20 years old, and you see them again they're 24. And from 20 to 24, I feel like when you're younger, you get to make mistakes and there's a lot less expectation on you. So if you keep repeating the same loops or the same habits, it's not as bad in my opinion, or at least from a societal point of view. We don't judge so negatively on people when they're younger and they keep making the same mistakes, or if their lives seem to not be progressing. But as you get older, you start to see the same person or the same people after 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, just do the exact same thing each year. It just starts to get a bit, I don't know, you sit there and wonder, like, how are you messing up or failing consistently? Like, how's there no progress? I can see someone being in a situation where they failed hard and it took them a long time to progress to kind of get to that baseline. And then from there, maybe they found success or they achieved whatever it is they wanted to achieve, because success is relative. But I think it's different when you see someone who, year one, they're doing A, B, and C. Year 5, they're still doing A, B, and C. Nothing's changed. Year 10, they're still doing A, B, and C. Nothing has changed. And to me, that's a bit fascinating. That's probably the best word I can think about right now to describe that. Fascinating. Just because to me, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I value my life a lot. So if I'm not progressing or if I don't feel like something's changing, it just kind of bugs me. Like it really bothers me. If you are new to any of my content, my name is Lenny Richardson. I go by Leviticus Rich. Welcome to my live training. Today in this training, we're going to learn the simple 3-step system I use to conquer each day and 10x my productivity. In this presentation, I'm going to share with you sort of the secret method that I use to dominate each day and get more done in a week than most people get done in months. And you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, that has to be an exaggeration. There's no way you have some kind of method where you can get more done in like a week than people get done in months. And I'm going to tell you right here now, that's not an exaggeration. I've been told by many people that I can get a lot done in like a day compared to most people. I've been told this, and I'll get into this as the presentation goes on, but in previous jobs I've had, people have told me this. In different people I've helped with their business, they've told me this. Just personal friends have told me this. I've had this sort of compliment many times. And that's sort of what let me identify that I had this technique that I'm going to share with you. You're going to be surprised by how simple it is to implement. I'm not going to say it's easy to implement. It does take a bit of practice and it does take a bit of work. Not a ton, but a little bit. But it's not complicated at all. So first things first, just a quick introduction for anyone that is not super familiar with me. I go by Leviticus Rich. I'm a real estate advisor here in Loudoun County, Virginia. I'm the former owner of sort of a brand called College Conqueror. The whole brand of College Conqueror was to help college students and high school students sort of understand different techniques and skills and just different lessons that they can apply in mainly college, but in life beyond. So that was things like finances, like basic finances, how to budget, how to study more efficiently, how to memorize things more efficiently, anything that could apply in college that could help them. The goal of the brand of College Conqueror was to teach them. And I like to say I went from a former depressed college student to a fulfilled lover of life. And I'm going to actually share with you a concept real quick that sort of took me from depressed college student to fulfilled lover of life. So I have a question for you. Do you want the good life? One of the things I really try to teach people and help people understand is sort of a concept known as eudaimonia. And so eudaimonia, if you're not familiar with it, it's sort of a ancient Greek philosophy term, sort of a concept from ancient Greek philosophy. And overall, it means the good life, the flourishing life, the fulfilled life. It was sort of coined by Socrates. Socrates, I used to be a big nerd when it came to philosophy and like history, but Socrates did not write anything. He sort of just orated, he dictated. He had a few followers, and his followers kind of wrote down things that he taught or any lessons he had that they could memorize or paraphrase in a way. Because some things they weren't actually just sitting there writing, but they kind of remembered the things he taught them, and they later on wrote it down. So I'm sure they may have mistaken a few things, but let's assume that everything they wrote down was correct and was exactly what he said verbatim. They sort of describe eudaimonia, his followers describe it, as a combination of health, wealth, and relationships. And the whole idea behind eudaimonia is that if you don't have those three things, you can't really have a fulfilled life or a fantastic life. You'd at best have an average life, a common life, but more likely it'd be sort of a subpar, mediocre life if you don't have all three things. And real quick, just to kind of go through it, I refer to those three things as pillars. My belief is that every human being at all times should be trying to build up each of those three pillars daily. Some pillars will take priority in people's lives over others, but effectively what you want to do is build up the health pillar. So that's your physical health and your mental health. The wealth pillar, that's money. And it's not just money. It's not just how much money you make, but it's also how much you spend and how much you're able to invest to kind of protect yourself and think ahead in the future. And then the final thing is relationships. And relationships, it does involve the sort of, I think, first thing that comes to mind, like love and sort of like sexual relationships, but it also involves social relationships. Like, do you have good friends? Do you have some status in your social circle? Do you participate in the community at all? So you need to have a combination of those three things in order to have eudaimonia. And like I said, eudaimonia is sort of a fulfilled life. So real quick, using the technique that I'm going to share with you, I was able to get a ton of stuff done. And I truly feel like with this technique, many times I would feel like I've condensed several years into a single year. Or even sometimes you'd be able to condense what felt like months into just weeks. So using this technique, I was able to go on multiple days per week, build a super fun and eventful social life. And the reason why I bring that up first is because one of the things I've heard from so many people is that they struggle to have a dating life, especially when you graduate college, especially when you're adulting. You kind of get into the work world and you find it super difficult to meet new people, make new friends, go out, date, do all those things. It's difficult to kind of coordinate it and put it into your schedule. So that's why I bring that up. During using this technique, I was able to write a 200 plus page book in about 3 months. Quick story about that book, by the way. This is the book on the left-hand side, or maybe it's right-hand for you. I'm not too sure. It's called 27 by 27. I sort of wrote it when I was 26, about to turn 27, and it's sort of just 27 lessons I learned in life. The reason why I bring that up is because the book originally was going to be about 300 or 400 pages, and I spent time condensing it. So the final copy is actually much shorter than it would have been. And even now, if you were to order it on Amazon, the font's like size 10 font, and it's still over 200 pages, just to kind of give you an idea of how much content is in the book. And then using this technique, I've also written several other books, some for real estate, just some small books, some that are just ebooks online for free. And I've also helped other people create programs, and I've created programs myself, different courses, things of that nature. And actually to this day, I do still help people with just different things they're working on in marketing and with their business. So just as a testament to how much you can get done with this formula that I'm going to share with you. And even using this technique, I was able to sort of develop my physique and go from overweight to about 11% body fat. I think the lowest I've been is about 8 or 9% body fat. But I would say in like this picture on the left with the shirt off, I'm probably about like 10%, 11%-ish. And for those of you that do not know, I used to be very obese when I was younger. This technique, you can slim down, write a book, start a business. There's a lot you can do with this technique. And even at one point, I started a company known as Affinity. And it was sort of just a Facebook ad and social media advertising agency. And for those of you that have never tried to start a business, it is a very long process. It is very time consuming. It's not fun all the time. And a lot of organization is required to do it, just as a testament to how much you can really get done with this technique. And also with this technique, I was able to sort of ramp up the popularity of my podcast, Meeting Virginia. Really quick, if you've never run a podcast before or like a show, it is very time consuming. It is very time consuming. It requires a lot of organization, chasing guests down, trying to get the guests to schedule, trying to persuade them to come on the show, trying to help them find the value of it, especially if you're not like famous, like I'm not famous. So just to get people to even consider the show, then getting them on, then managing the people that don't show up, managing the reschedules, then publishing the content, getting the content out there. If you have a video editor like myself, you have to get the content out there. It is a very, very, very time-consuming process. But luckily with this technique, it's much more manageable. So it's actually super quick. It's so manageable that I've actually seen other podcasts that have huge production teams take longer to put out content than I would. Now, of course, they're able to get a lot of more guests and stuff like that. So there's other things they're able to do. Obviously, if you're just a 1 or 2 person or small group of people, you can't do it like myself. But with my technique, even putting out content or getting guests, I can do relatively quickly compared to even big teams. And I've also used this method to make my workday at a law firm where I worked a lot less stressful. And for anyone that's familiar with the law industry, or if you've ever worked at a law firm, or if you're a lawyer yourself, it's very, very stressful. Working at a law firm is very stressful, to say the least. But using this technique, I was able to sort of keep things organized, and my workflow is actually extremely good, to the point where other people at the law firm would often say, like, how are you not stressed? How are you getting this much done so quickly? And you're going to learn how to do that very shortly once I explain to you my 3-step method. So, like I said, quick recap. With this formula that I'm going to share with you, you'll be able to improve your health, be able to gain muscle like this guy on the far left. You'll be able to ball out, hopefully improve your finances like this guy in the middle with the cool coat on. He's about to go out to the club and drop some ones. Who knows what he's going to do with those ones, but hopefully he's going to donate those ones to charity. And then we have these people on the far right. You'll be able to have a much better social circle with this technique. You'll be able to spend more time with people like your family or your friends, or wherever, however you want to use your time to better your social life. You'll be able to do that with this formula. All right. So real quick, I want to give some background on how I came up with the formula before I kind of get into the formula itself. So long story short, I used to have what's called a fixed mindset. Back when I was in college, I would say back in freshman and sophomore year, I sort of had this fixed mindset. I sort of had the belief that however you were is how you always were meant to be. Hopefully that makes sense. So basically, if you were intelligent, that was because your genetics made you intelligent. And if you weren't that intelligent, and if you couldn't do very well in school, that was because your genetics made it so. You just weren't able to do well in school. If you were super skinny, no amount of working out could make you big. You were stuck where you were. And if you were super big, my belief at the time was that you were just by default genetically wired to be super jacked and ripped. That was my mindset at the time. I didn't think it was truly possible to sort of advance or grow. And I remember actually at times back in college, my original major was engineering. And there's some concepts in math, and I would struggle to get them. In hindsight, it was really just because I didn't study that much. But at the time, I thought it was just because I wasn't wired to understand math very well. And it sort of became a bit of a limiting belief, so to speak. Like I had this mentality that you have to play the cards that you're dealt with in life. And you can't change your hand. You can't alter anything. You can't switch the game around. However everything was, is how it was meant to be. There's no changing anything. So eventually, I kind of got kicked out of college, not once, but twice. And I was trying to let people know I didn't get kicked out because of anything super extreme. I didn't fail out. It wasn't because of like drugs or anything disciplinary by any means. Nothing academic. It was financial, purely financial. I just couldn't afford the tuition. And one day I got a fantastic letter in the mail that basically said, hey, you didn't pay your tuition. So next semester, you will not be coming back to school. Pack your bags and get out. That's basically what the letter said. So I was short on my own. Eventually got my own apartment, kind of off campus. Lived with a few roommates. But at the time, went through a lot of depression and anxiety. Even before then, I was kind of going through depression before that. Just had a lot of issues with, you're on a college campus. I struggled to talk to girls. No girl wanted to talk to me. I was single. I struggled with my health. I was overweight, had a super terrible diet. And that definitely contributed to my negative mood and my negative mindset. Social circle it was okay, but it wasn't great. Once I kind of got to the main campus of college, everyone sort of kind of split up, and I lived by myself at the time when I was taking classes. So it didn't really impact me positively from a mental standpoint, if that makes sense. So getting kicked out was kind of that thing that just pushed it over and really went down a really bad rabbit hole of depression and anxiety. Just feeling sorry about myself and just always having sort of negative, intrusive thoughts. So I tried to go down the self-improvement route to fix my life. And I sort of reached a point where I wanted to change, and I kind of had some hatred for myself. And almost kind of in hindsight, I'm kind of glad that this is how my brain works. But I would almost sit there and just ask myself how to solve problems. Like, I think by default, my nature is to try to solve problems. And I'll sit there and say, I hate myself. Like, how do I solve this problem? And the answer I came up with is read. Just read more books, and eventually you'll find answers. So I'd go to the library all the time. I'd sit there, besides working, I didn't have much else to do. I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't have a girlfriend. I wasn't really working out at the time. So I would just go and sit in the library and just read. That's kind of how I got into philosophy. And I picked up finance books and psychology books, a bunch of different books, whatever I can kind of get my hands on, or whatever one book recommended. I'd finish a book, it had recommendations, and I kind of move on to another book. Long story short, though, one of the books that came up was Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. And in her book, Mindset, she sort of talks about the idea of a fixed mindset and limiting beliefs versus a growth mindset. Yeah, she sort of talks about the idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And it's exactly as it sounds. A fixed mindset was what I had. It forces you into this box where you don't think you can improve. You're not really open to learning more things. You're not really open to improvement. The growth mindset puts you into not so much a box, but it expands your mindset to the point where you're more open to learning new things, or you think that you can adapt. You think that you can improve. If you are a super skinny guy, you think you can gain muscles. If you're broke, you do think that you can be rich one day. If you are single, you do think that there's some method to being able to attract women, or if you're a female, attract men, whatever. And so reading that book kind of changed a lot for me. It sort of made me reconsider my viewpoints and my mindset and everything like that. And then over time, I sort of came up with an idea of a business I wanted to start. And when I first got kicked out, I was about 19 years old, like 18 or 19-ish. I think I was about 19 at the time, almost 20. And you kind of learn that when you're working just 9-to-5 jobs or, retail work, whatever, you don't really learn in college how to budget, how to pay rent, how to do taxes. You don't learn any of that stuff. Even from like a practical level, there's some things about just nutrition, just getting certain foods that you don't even learn from college, just basic survival, like life skills. You don't learn that. So that's around the time when I created the company or business I mentioned, College Conqueror. Like I said, the whole idea of it was to help high school students and college students succeed in college and a bit beyond. Because after a while of working, it was kind of on and off that I got kicked out. I got kicked out twice. I was kind of out of college for about a year. They kind of let me back in for a semester. I did really good, and they kicked me out again, told me my courses or my grades didn't count. So it was on and off that I was in and out of college. But around that time, I sort of felt like I cracked a code to like just basic adulting. And it was a code that I think at that time no one else had really understood or even knew about. Like everyone's in college on campus and everything's pretty much paid for if you go to the dorm cafeterias, or everything's relatively cheap. The idea of budgeting and investing, all those things don't come up. Everyone thinks that they're okay. No one's planning ahead for the future, really. They're taking classes, sure, for future career, but they're not really thinking much about just the future itself, as far as those little nuances, like, oh, when I get older, my metabolism might slow down, so I should probably focus on how to diet better, or in the future, I might want to retire one day, so maybe I should understand this thing called a 401k or a Roth IRA. I don't get too deep in the weeds on different concepts, but things like that. Like when you're in college, you don't think about any of those things. So that was what College Conqueror was for. It was to help people kind of learn those things and understand those things and kind of bring it in front of their face. And the main way I would do that is, luckily, I still kind of have my college email, and you can still access free. I shouldn't say they're free, but for free, you can still access like different studies and different research papers. So I was able to kind of read research papers and different library books and stuff like that, and sort of learn things. Some of it was things I've learned from experience. Others were theoretical, and I would sort of just give my take on things. So that was sort of a long-winded version of how I sort of learned about this formula. But I also, one of the things I kind of learned while studying and trying to help people when I did College Conqueror is that there were certain techniques. This technique is one of them that I'm going to share with you. There are certain techniques, though, that people did to achieve success. And in some way, shape, or form, the same technique is used by some of the most successful people you know. Now, regardless of if you like Dwayne Johnson or Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whoever comes to mind that you consider successful, chances are, in some way, shape, or form, maybe with minor tweaks or minor changes, but overall, they probably use this formula in their lives. And that is what led them to being so successful. So, what is this formula? I'm sure you're sitting there, you're like, tell me the formula, tell me the formula. You keep going on about the backstory and all this stuff. I want to know the formula. So I'm going to show you the formula. It's super simple. Like I mentioned, it's very easy to comprehend, but somewhat difficult to implement. So this formula is what I call the 3P model. First things first. The first P, plan things out. The second P, prioritize your tasks. And then the third P, produce objective results. So you're probably sitting there thinking to yourself, like, okay, that's it. Like, it's super simple. And yes, it is super simple. But when I first came up with a different version of this 3-step formula, I realized no one does this. Like, literally think about most of the people you know, and I guarantee 99% of them do not do this at all. I will say, step 1 right here is plan. The majority of people you know probably don't even plan out their day. Like, really sit there for a second and think about it. How many people do you know wake up in the morning and know exactly what they're going to do from start to finish? Like, really sit there and think about that for a second. Chances are most people don't do it. You probably know like a handful, maybe depending on who you're around, maybe you're around some like super high achievers, maybe a good amount do. But most people don't plan out their day. Most people just kind of let the day happen to them. They don't happen to their day. So step 1 is plan your day out. Now, I tell people that you need to be a general in your own life. You need to have structure in your own life. If you have a general or even a CEO of a company or a captain of a pirate ship, some leader, they need to organize and structure everything in order to be successful. If you're a general going to war, you can't just haphazardly have your troops just roam. They'll all die. It's a death sentence. If you're a CEO in a company, you can't just have everyone doing whatever they want at all times. You have different positions. You have CEO, CFO, you have admin, you have HR, you have managers, you have a bunch of people doing different things. You need structure. You need to get general in your life, much like there's generals and CEOs in real life. And to me, the way you truly structure things and the way you truly organize everything is by having a planner. Again, it sounds so basic, but in my personal experience, simply just having a planner is the ultimate game changer in productivity. Like, if you leave this presentation, if you get nothing else out of this presentation, understand that getting a planner will change your life. And I'm not even exaggerating. I swear I'm not exaggerating. Most people, like I said, don't plan out their day. Getting a planner will almost force you to begin planning out your day. You might not be the most efficient at it, but you at least start to sit there and think about, what do I do daily and what leads me to results that I want? Now I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but yeah, getting a planner will dramatically change your life. Trust me on that. So real quick, I want to show you exactly how I go about using a planner, because I've actually seen and worked with people that try to plan out their day. And if they do check off the first box, having a planner, most people from that point on still use the planner ineffectively. So my personal belief is that you should plan your days out by the hour, starting from the time when you wake up until the time you plan on going to sleep. Every hour should be accounted for. Now, I'm saying an hour for a very specific reason. Some people I've heard try half an hour. Some people try like chunks of like 2 or 3 hours. I personally think an hour is the perfect duration of time to plan things out because it's enough time where if you focus, you can actually get something done, like something substantial done. Half an hour to me is a bit too short. Like to me, once you start doing something important, let's say for example you're a college student and you have an essay to write. By the time you open the Word document, even start to outline or start to think about what you want to write, that alone will take 15 minutes. So you probably won't be able to produce any real results in 30 minutes if the initial 10 to 15 minutes is spent just getting, just planning things out, like just getting from point A to point B. Does that make sense at all? So for this reason, I think an hour is more reasonable. You'll find that once you start planning things out, you'll get a better estimation of how long things will take. When I first tried to do this method, when I first tried to plan things out, in your head, you'll look at the paper, you'll look at the planner, and you'll think to yourself, oh, this one will take an hour, this won't take 2 hours, this won't take 3 hours. And you'll try to give yourself like 30 minutes to do a bunch of stuff. And it never happens. It never happens. And the issue with that is you get frustrated. And I tend to find that when people get a bit frustrated and when they don't see results quickly enough, they give up. Or they start to slow down their progress, and then ultimately they give up, or they end up just failing completely, or they do it in like a super unproductive, haphazard way. So in order to avoid that, I'm suggesting plan everything out by the hour. Like me personally, usually I start my day at about 5 or 6 a.m. in general. On my calendar, I used to have a planner. Now I use my phone calendar. From 5 a.m., I literally have wake up. It's the first thing. Wake up, and I have at about 10 or 11 p.m. go to bed. Every day, for the most part. There's some days where I don't do it because I plan on being up later, or some days where I plan on waking up later, or have something the next day. So I'm planning around that. But in general, I start by putting wake up and go to bed at whatever time you plan on waking up and go to bed. And then from there, you fill in everything. And I'm going to explain to you exactly how you should start filling in things in a second. But make sure every hour is accounted for. Now, some things I don't put in, like lunch or whatever. I don't put in like lunch or dinner or snacks. But you can if you really want to. I don't do it because in general, I actually don't even eat that much. I probably in general eat like 2 meals a day. But that's just me. Obviously, you need to tailor it to what you want to do and to what your day involves. So the next step, prioritize. Now, like I mentioned, there's one thing to start putting things in a planner. There's another thing to put the right things in the planner in the right order. I have met some people that do have a planner, and I have met people that try their best to follow their planner. And some of these people actually do follow their planner. The issue I found is that a lot of people don't put the right stuff in their planner. They don't really prioritize extremely well. So I found that sometimes people put like just random things. Like, I'll give you an example. I had an old roommate, and this old roommate didn't have a planner. But what they would do is they put clean, study, go to bed, free time, go to work. And that was it. They would just put it like as bullet points in the planner without any time, no times. There was no deadlines or anything like that. They would just put them like randomly in the planner. And even though they did get that stuff done, the issue was that it wasn't leading toward any goal. Like, it was the most generic stuff. And the issue was that they would end up just filling up the day with, in my opinion, garbage activity. There's a concept real quick that just came to mind that I want to share with you. It's called Parkinson's Law. And Parkinson's Law pretty much says the amount of time it takes to do a task is based on how much time you give it. So, for example, if you're a college student again, say you give yourself 5 hours to do a project. If you give yourself 5 hours to do a project, it'll take 5 hours to get the project done. Or even another more simple example. You're a kid. Your mom leaves. She says, by the time I get back home, you need to clean your room. I feel like we've all been there where your mom is gone for about 5 or 6 hours, and maybe it really takes you you could have gotten the place clean in 20, 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, not that much stuff, dirty. A few dishes that need to be washed, maybe some clothes that need to go in the laundry. 45 minutes tops, maybe an hour tops. You hear her pull up, or she gives you that phone call, I'm on my way. Now you start to panic. And now that whole 5 or 6 hours that she was gone was wasted. And you spent the last few minutes trying to get that work done that you could have already done in the very beginning, at your own pace. Now you're rushing to get it done. And sort of the point behind that is the amount of time you give yourself to do a task is how long the task will take. Now, obviously, you need to be reasonable about this. Some things do take longer than expected, but most basic things don't need to take that long. And the point that I'm making is that my old roommate would just put different bullet points in the planner. And because they're just putting different bullet points, it took them all day to get basic stuff done. Like laundry and just studying, all that stuff took them forever. So they never actually got like real stuff done ahead of time, or they didn't really progress like they could have. So you need to prioritize in order to implement this formula successfully. Now, I want to say, don't confuse action for progression. Similar to that roommate example that I mentioned, it's easy for people to just do different random things and feel like they're progressing. From my understanding, when you achieve a goal, you kind of get like a dopamine boost. You get like a hit of dopamine. And it's almost like a winner effect. Like you do something and you want to kind of get that dopamine boost or that dopamine hit again. So you keep looking for wins. Now, this can be used strategically, but the issue is that some people, what they do is they'll find wins in things that don't matter. Like in my planner, I wrote to check my email. I checked my email. I accomplished something. It's like, well, you did an action, but you haven't progressed because you didn't need to check that email. Or maybe you did some chores and you feel like you're satisfied because you did some chores. You did something. You put it on the planner and you get to check it off. So you feel like that dopamine hit. But the chores didn't need to take that long. You didn't really get much done, to progress towards your goals. So I think it's important to not confuse action for progression. There's two different things. There's overlap, of course, but they're not exactly the same thing. So to me, the best way I try to help illustrate the idea of how to structure one's day and how to plan and organize is basically what I call little rocks and big rocks. So the whole idea, imagine you have a jar of rocks, kind of like on the screen. Your goal is to fill the jar of rocks without any overflow. Nothing can be poured out. Everything needs to be used. I give you 4 components. I give you big rocks. I give you sand. I give you water. And I give you small rocks. Like I said, your goal is to put all of those things in the jar without any overflow. And you have to use it all. It all has to fit. If you're like most people, and the rocks are the daily things you do per day. If you're like most people, you're just throwing random stuff in the jar, just trying to fill it up. You're putting sand in first, then you're kind of putting some water in, then some big rocks and small rocks, and then a little bit more sand and a little bit more water. You're just doing things haphazardly. The issue with that is the jars can overflow. By the time you put the big rocks in, then the sand on top of it, then the water, it's just going to flow everywhere. And now you have no space for the small rocks. What you should do is you should sit there and prioritize and figure out which rocks are most important and which should go in first, which should go in second, and so on and so forth. So then you understand, okay, I should put the big rocks in first, then the small rocks, then the sand, finally the water. Let the water seep into the cracks, then the sand is kind of seeping into the cracks as well with the water, and now everything fits in the jar, and now there's no overflow. And this is how your tasks should be. You should begin every day starting off with the big rocks on your planner. So let's say, for example, you want to lose 20 pounds in the next year. What would be the most important thing to do every single day to progress? And think of big rocks as, if nothing else, what one thing could you do that would lead you closer to your goal? Consider that a big rock. Like if you need to kind of picture how to prioritize everything. A big rock would be, if nothing else, just one thing that moves you closer to your goal. So, for example, if you're trying to gain, or if you're trying to lose 20 pounds in a year, a big rock could simply be going to the gym. That's it. It could just be going to the gym. And then maybe a small rock might be getting healthier foods. Maybe the sand could be watching a video about how to stretch or do cardio more efficiently. And then maybe the water could simply be looking at social media content to kind of motivate you. Does that make sense at all? You want to prioritize your day so that way the big rocks are first, then the small rocks, and these are the things that are most important that actually progress you towards your goal. Then the sand, and then the water. The sand and the water are the things that they kind of help, but you can do without them. If you skip them or if they don't really come up or if you don't have time for them, it doesn't really impact you that much. And by doing this, you're always progressing toward your goal in some way, shape, or form. So hopefully that example makes sense. And then we have the final step, is produce. Now, I would say this last step is probably the hardest. The first two are relatively easy to understand and they're relatively easy to do as far as pulling out the planner and just writing stuff in it. The hard part is actually doing something. And this is the part where most people, if they even get to the first step, they definitely fail at the last step. They don't do anything. When I was in college, so many people would have an idea of what they wanted to do. They get their syllabus and they know I have a project due on February 28th. Let's just use that date as an example, random date. I have a project due. My professor told me about it at the end of January. And they spend the whole month not doing it. And then by the time like the 26th or the 27th comes, they panic and they freak out. They're like, oh, no, I gotta get the work done. I gotta get it done. They knew what they wanted to do and they knew how urgent it was to get it done. But the issue was that they didn't take action. They didn't produce. And then some people, that's the point where some people fail because they didn't get it turned in its time. They ask for an extension, or they kind of do it sloppy. They do it quickly, and then it's just not as good. And then you got the few people out there that work well under pressure. But that's a bit of a dangerous path to go down. And in a lot of instances, it doesn't work very well. So try to avoid that. But the point I'm making is that for many people, they procrastinate. And even if they have a plan, even if they know what they need to do, and even if they know when they should have that thing finished or when they intend to have it finished, they don't do it because they procrastinate. And procrastination, in my opinion, happens for a bunch of different reasons. But my belief is that in order to kill procrastination, I have the belief that you should attack things with speed. And to me, speed is the amount of time between your idea and execution of the idea. I've seen people, for example, when they have, say, a business, they have an idea. They're like, yeah, you know what, Lenny, I got this idea. I want to start a course. And, you know, this course of mine, I'm thinking about it. I think it might be a good hit. I think I got some good information to provide. I kind of want to add like some coaching to it. I want to add some like bonuses to it. I'm like, okay, cool. That sounds like a great idea. Fantastic. You have the know-how and you have the insights to make this course work well. Like, you know, you'd be a great coach. You have a lot of experience. Cool. See them a month later. So how's that course going? You know, I'm working on it, man. You know, I haven't gotten that first module done, but you know, I'm still planning the outline. Okay, cool. I got you. 3 months go by. How's that course, man? Did you get it done? No, man. You know, I'm still working on the outline. I'm trying to get the perfect like format going, trying to make sure it's like high quality, trying to make sure everything's going well, which I totally get about making sure things are quality. But I found that the longer it takes to start something, the longer it takes to get something done, the easier it is to procrastinate and the easier it becomes to never actually finish it ever. And I feel like most people, they do this. They have an idea of what they want to do. They have the motivation, but they don't start to implement. They don't start to actually execute or produce. And because they don't produce, it never gets done. So it's out there floating in the ether, never to be accomplished. Really quick story, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I'm a fan of like history. Especially people like generals to me fascinating, like old, like Alexander the Great and Napoleon and things like that. They just fascinate me. Just the mindset behind those guys, Caesar, all those guys. And there's a cool story I read in this like big textbook about Alexander the Great, maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And it was it was about a strategy that Alexander the Great used. He had a lot of strategies, but one strategy he used that apparently helped make him super successful was he was able to sort of build up a camp and tear down the camp extremely quickly. And so what I mean by that is he'd be out with, his troops. They're out sort of roaming or wandering, trying to conquer new lands. And he had some way, and I don't remember them ever describing exactly what he did, but he had a very weird way of setting up like his tents. I think he just set up like a tent in like the most basic way, like one stick, and it would just kind of be like a tarp almost, if I remember correctly. I don't know if they gave like a super deep explanation to it, but it was efficient enough where people stayed warm and they weren't really exposed to the environment too much. But he built it up in such a simple way that if they got word that an enemy was approaching, or if they got word that an enemy was nearby and they thought that they wanted to ambush the enemy, they were able to tear down the camp like immediately. And apparently back during those times, one issue when it came to ambushes is that it took people so long to build up camp and tear down their camp. So you're kind of a sitting duck while you're trying to tear down your camp and gather your resources and then move out. Apparently Alexander the Great did not have that issue. He found some way to kind of gather his resources, get the horses, get the camp and tents put away before people could attack him, or if he needed to attack someone else, he would do it quickly. And the reason why I tell that story is because one of the key variables to him defeating other troops and other forces was that he would attack them with such speed and he would adapt so quickly that the enemy couldn't react fast enough. They'd have word that Alexander the Great's here, and they think they can ambush him because they can get to his camp in like a day. Meanwhile, he received word that they're coming, and in minutes he's gone, so they can never actually get him. So, and the point I want to make is that similar to the way Alexander the Great sort of used speed to protect himself and get the jump on his enemies, you should also implement speed in your life to attack your goals and get the jump on them. I will say over the years, one thing I've also found about procrastination, why people procrastinate, is because people get in their heads and they try to make sure the thing they're doing is perfect. I don't believe that anything's perfect. I don't believe in perfection. I believe in progression. When Mark Zuckerberg first tried to start Facebook, there were so many flaws, there were so many errors, so many things that went wrong. Every business you can think of, everything that you've ever seen created, that did not start perfect. It started off with flaws. It started off haphazardly, or not haphazardly, so to speak, but it started off with issues. And as time went on, those issues were either eradicated or improved upon, or something else was introduced to fix it. And the point I'm making is that it's better to take imperfect action and just kind of correct it over time than to take no action at all, which means you're not producing anything. Does that make sense at all? So don't be, like I said, utilize speed. If you have an idea, attack it quickly. And don't be super concerned about trying to make it perfect. Just start. Just try to get it done, and then let it kind of work itself out as you implement, as you put forth action. So, we've reached the end of the presentation. Hopefully by now, you have all the tools you need to 10x your day.